I want you to close your eyes for a second. Seriously, just humor me. Picture a great leader, the archetype. What do you see?
Well, I suspect most people are seeing, a Steve Jobs type.
Mm.
Someone on a stage, maybe a black turtleneck, pointing at a giant screen.
Right. They're pointing at the horizon. They're talking about a bold new future. They are rallying the troops with a vision of what could be.
Hmm.
We are just so conditioned to associate leadership with ambition, with wanting more reach, more impact, a better tomorrow.
That's the standard definition, really. The visionary, the one who sees what's missing from the world and drives everyone toward filling that gap.
Okay, so here's the curveball. What if I told you that definition is not just slightly off, but maybe the root cause of why so many leaders fail?
Mm.
What if trying to be a visionary is the very thing preventing you from actually leading?
That is the core counterintuitive premise of the text we're unpacking today. It's a philosophical treatise called The Anchor of Presence, Leadership Through Orientation.
Well-
And I have to be honest, when I first read that title, I thought it was going to be some, mindfulness fluff.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah.
It's a pretty brutal deconstruction of modern leadership.
It really is. It takes this idea of aspiration, which we usually put on a pedestal, and argues that it's actually a trap. It pits aspiration against something it calls orientation.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into the definitions, I have to push back on this a little right out of the gate.
Please do.
I mean, look at every business book from the last 50 years. Start with why. Good to great. They all say you need a North Star. If you don't have a vision of the future, aren't you just drifting?
I get it. How can having a goal be a bad thing?
Exactly.
This is where the nuance is so critical. The source isn't saying you shouldn't have plans or you shouldn't check the map, but it draws a really hard line between having a plan and what it calls inhabiting a want.
Inhabiting a want. What does that mean?
That's how the text defines aspiration. It calls it intelligence aimed at a future state. It's a mindset that is fundamentally focused on what's missing from the present.
Okay.
It looks at today, at your team, your product, whatever,
Huh.
and it says, this is insufficient. I need to be there, not here.
But isn't that just motivation? I mean, if I'm perfectly happy with where I am, I'm never going to improve. It feels like this source is asking us to just settle.
It does feel like that at first, doesn't it? But let's look at the cost. The source argues this mindset creates what it calls a split mind.
A split mind. Okay, break that down.
Think about your mental bandwidth, like the battery on your phone. If your intelligence is constantly aimed at a future state, a huge chunk of your processing power is tied up in a simulation.
A simulation of the future.
Right. You're imagining it, worrying about the gap between now and then, trying to bridge that distance.
Okay, I see where you're going. It's like running a really high-intensity background app.
Exactly. If, say, 40% of your brain is processing a future that hasn't happened yet, you only have 60% of your intelligence available to solve the problem that's right in front of you.
So you're geographically here, but psychologically, you're somewhere else.
You're somewhere else. Which means the visionary is actually distracted.
Or worse than distracted.
Much worse. They're distorted.
Hmm.
Because they're so focused on the future they want, they stop seeing the present as it actually is. They start filtering reality.
So if data comes in that contradicts the vision.
They ignore it. Or they explain it away. If the team is burning out, they just don't see it. Because in their head, they're already at the finish line celebrating.
That actually explains a lot of failed product launches I've seen. You know, the ones where everyone on the ground knew it wasn't going to work, but the CEO is just marching forward like failure is not an option.
And that leads directly to the next concept, performance. The source argues that when you're led by aspiration, your leadership becomes a performance.
You're acting.
You start acting out the role of the future success to convince everyone and, yourself that you're going to make it.
The old fake it till you make it.
Which leads to what the text calls optimization for perception. The aspirational leader becomes obsessed with how things look.
The slide deck has to be perfect.
The press release has to sound revolutionary. It's all because they're trying to validate a future that doesn't exist yet.
You know, the source had a really biting line about this. It said, this kind of intelligence can motivate, but it cannot lead. And that feels like such a crucial distinction. We confuse hype for leadership all the time.
We do. Aspiration is high-octane fuel for motivation. It gets people excited. Look at that mountain, let's climb it. But leadership isn't just about getting people excited to hike.
It's about navigation.
It's about navigation. If you're constantly staring at the peak, you are going to walk right off a cliff because you weren't looking at the trail in front of you.
So if aspiration is the trap, the state of being split between here and there, What's the alternative? The source calls it orientation.
Orientation, yeah.
It sounds a little like map reading, or maybe something you do during freshman week at college.
I'll give you that. It's a little drier than visionary.
Yeah.
But the text defines orientation as intelligence grounded in accurate perception of reality as it is.
As it is, not as we want it to be.
Correct. An oriented intelligence doesn't negate the future. It knows the future is coming, but it isn't governed by it. It makes decisions based on contact with the present moment.
I need a concrete example here, because contact with the present moment can sound a little abstract. How do I know if I'm oriented or just busy?
The source gives us a really specific mechanic of action. It says the oriented leader acts because action is required. It stops because stopping is correct.
How do you know? Is there like a litmus test?
I think there is, yeah. Based on the test is something like, if no one were watching, would I still be doing this?
Ooh, that's good. That really cuts through it.
Because aspirational leadership almost always requires an audience. It needs validation. Look at me leading. But orientation is simpler. You catch a falling glass, not because you want applause,
But because the glass is falling.
because the glass is falling.
So it's a difference between the manager who holds a 2-hour meeting on synergy just to show they're in charge versus the one who quietly removes a roadblock for their team and just goes back to work.
Precisely. The person catching the glass isn't thinking, how will this make me look? Does this align with my 5-year vision? They are just in contact with reality. The glass is falling, so action is required.
And the source says this creates a really specific feeling for the people around them. It's not charisma.
No, not at all. It's stability. And this is where the text gets really interesting about the psychology of followers. We tend to think people follow leaders because they're inspired.
Right, big speech.
But the source argues that deep down, people follow leaders because they want to survive. They want to be safe.
Right, from stability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In a world that is chaotic and constantly trying to sell you a different future, someone who's totally solid in the present feels incredibly magnetic. Not because they're flashy, but because they're heavy. They have mass.
But hold on. We have to address the elephant in the room here. The visionaries. The aspirational leaders. They're usually way more popular, at least at first. We love the flashiness. We love the promise of the moon.
Oh, absolutely. This is what the source calls the charisma trap. It explains that aspirational leaders are often dangerous because they're so compelling. They speak fluently about the future because they aren't bogged down by the friction of reality.
It's easy to promise a jetpack when you don't have to actually build the engine.
You've hit it. If you aren't fully feeling the constraints of the present, you can paint these beautiful, unencumbered pictures that makes you charismatic. It makes people want to give you money. It makes people want to work for you.
But the source says there's a hidden cost. It says aspiration collapses without an audience.
And this is a critical psychological insight. Because the aspirational leader is performing a role, the role of future success. They need an audience to believe in that performance to keep it alive.
They need constant reinforcement.
Constant. If people stop clapping or if the stock price drops, their whole internal structure just crumbles.
And that's the crisis test. This was the part of the reading that felt the most actionable to me. It breaks down exactly what happens when the pressure hits.
When conditions change, the market crashes, the project fails, the aspirational leader fractures. The source says vision becomes excuse, blame appears, performance intensifies.
We have all seen this leader. The boss who, when things go wrong, just starts shouting louder. They double down on the rhetoric. You guys just don't see the vision. We need to push harder.
They're trying to bridge the gap between their imagined future and the harsh present with words, just with language. They think if they just say it with enough conviction, reality will bend to their will.
And how does that compare to the oriented leader in a crisis?
The source says they do not wobble.
I love that phrase, do not wobble.
They don't rush to explain away the problem. They don't try to spin it. They don't fill the silence with nervous chatter about how this is actually a good thing.
They just metabolize the reality.
That's a great way to put it. They metabolize it. They look at the fire, except the fire is real, and they pick up the extinguisher.
Right.
The source notes that oriented leaders are often mistaken for being passive or slow during normal times because they aren't making a big show of things. But when the crisis arrives, the difference is unmistakable.
While the aspirational leaders are escalating their language,
The oriented leader moves.
it reminds me of that quote, I think it's military doctrine, slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
It fits perfectly. Followers align with oriented leaders not because they were convinced by a speech, but because the direction is simply correct. When the building is filled with smoke, you don't follow the person giving a keynote about fire safety.
You follow the person who knows where the exit is and is already walking toward it.
Exactly.
I want to pivot to a section of the text that I actually struggled with a bit, and I think a lot of our listeners might too. The source argues we need to break the link between leading and teaching.
I thought you might bump on that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole servant leader model is huge right now.
Hmm.
We're told that great leaders are mentors. They're supposed to teach their team, help them grow. But this source seems to say they're, what, mutually exclusive?
Not mutually exclusive, but distinct functions. And the distinction is fascinating. The text argues that teaching is inherently aspirational.
Because you're trying to get the student to a future state of knowledge?
Partly, but also because teaching arises from error. It relies on narrative. To teach, I have to say, okay, you currently think X, but you need to think Y. Here's the story of how we get from X to Y. It's about explanation. It's about sequence.
Okay, I follow that. Teaching is a journey from ignorance to understanding.
But leadership, the source argues, does not arise from explanation. It arises from position.
Position.
It's about where you stand relative to the challenge. The function of leadership isn't to persuade you to understand why we are moving. It's to establish alignment so we do move.
You're saying sometimes you just don't have time to explain the why.
It's deeper than time. It's about the source of authority. If I have to explain everything to you to get you to move, I'm relying on your understanding to generate action. I am teaching. But if I'm truly oriented, if I'm clearly seeing reality, my action itself creates a wake that pulls you along.
And the source suggests this is why great leaders are often poor teachers.
Right. They just get it and they move. They can't always explain the steps of how they got there, which makes them really frustrating mentors. And conversely, great teachers are often poor leaders because they get stuck in the explanation.
They love the narrative.
They love the narrative so much they hesitate to just act. They want everyone to understand the map perfectly before anyone even starts the car.
That is a harsh truth. We keep trying to promote the best talkers, the best explainers into leadership roles. And then we wonder why they freeze up when a decision needs to be made without a slide deck.
Which brings us right to the modern problem. The source dedicates a whole section to why this distinction matters right now. And this connects to something you and I talk about all the time, AI.
Yeah, this part took a turn I was not expecting. The source argues that our modern systems, politics, business, even spirituality, they all reward aspiration. We reward the promise.
We've built a world that elevates people who promise futures. The politician promising a golden age, the CEO promising exponential growth. We reward the performance. And now, we are feeding that performance into machines.
The text argues that if AI is trained on human data and our human leadership data is largely aspirational.
Then we are training AI to hallucinate.
Okay, explain that connection.
Well, think about what a large language model does. It predicts the next most likely word. It's a probability engine aimed entirely at a future state, the completed sentence. It has no physical body. It has no present moment. It is pure, ungrounded aspiration.
So when an AI gives you a confident-sounding answer that is completely factually wrong.
That is optimization without orientation. It's mimicking the form of an answer, the confidence, the structure, the tone, without any contact with the reality of the answer.
It sounds decisive while being completely directionless.
Exactly. And the source warns that as we integrate AI more and more into decision-making, we are going to see a massive amplification of this aspirational mind. We're building systems that can generate infinite plausible visions, infinite strategic plans.
Yeah, but have zero ability to sense what is actually true. That is terrifying. We're automating the fake it till you make it CEO.
We are industrializing the hollow executive.
So if the problem is systemic, if our culture and our machines are pushing us toward this performative state, what's the solution? The source ends with this concept of the quiet standard.
It does. And I love that it doesn't offer a 5-step plan to becoming oriented.
Right, because that would be aspirational. Step 1, stop trying to achieve things.
The source describes leadership not as a skill you learn, but as a condition that emerges. It says true leadership does not announce itself.
It does not inspire through desire. It does not recruit through fear or hope.
That's the line. No fear, no hope, just reality. It stands somewhere real and does not move unless reality requires it to. That is the very definition of stability.
It's almost like gravity. You don't do gravity, you just have mass, and things are naturally attracted to you.
That is a beautiful way to put it. Orientation gives you mass, Aspiration makes you weightless.
Hmm.
You float away into your vision, and you might take people with you for a while, but eventually everyone just drifts apart.
Orientation keeps you on the ground.
It keeps you on the ground.
So let's bring this home for the listener who's maybe driving to work right now, worrying about their quarterly goals. This is a tough pill to swallow. It feels like we're asking them to stop dreaming.
I don't think it's about stopping the dream.
Hmm.
It's about checking your footing. The source isn't saying, don't go anywhere. It's saying, don't pretend you're already there.
It asks us to give up the need to be somewhere else.
Which is maybe the hardest thing for a human ego to do. We're wired to escape the present, to say, I'm not the CEO yet, I'm not the millionaire yet, I'm not the savior. We define ourselves by what we aren't.
But paradoxically, admitting I'm right here is the only way to actually lead.
Because you can't lead anyone else until you stop trying to escape your own reality. If you're running away from the present, why would anyone follow you?
That's the thought I want to leave everyone with today. We spend so much time building our personal brand, our 5-year vision, our narrative. We are performing leadership.
We're auditioning for a role we haven't got yet.
So here's the challenge, derived right from the text. If true leadership requires giving up the need to be somewhere else, are you brave enough to stop performing? Can you sit in a meeting without the buzzwords, without the projection, and just deal with what's actually on the table?
It's terrifying. It feels like doing nothing.
Yeah.
But it's the only place where real authority actually lives.
Heavy stuff today. I feel like I need to go delete my LinkedIn bio and start over.
Just don't replace it with something aspirational. Maybe just leave it blank for a while, see what happens.
I just might. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time, right here in the present.